Hello, everybody. My name is Aaron Canole. Welcome back once again to another edition of the Movie Battleground. Today's matchup is going to be different than the last few we've had. We spent the last couple of weeks sort of bringing in people back to the show and getting their first matches into the season. But tonight we have a couple of debuts from brand new competitors. And this one, it's going to start off on a very slight somber note, but I have a feeling it's going to get a lot more fun from there because, as you guys know, between seasons of the show, once we ended last year, I reached out to a number of different people that I know to sort of bring more faces into the league. And one of my big things was I attempted to reach out to people who weren't a part of the traditional fan league setup, because as we know, a lot of the people who sort of came in as competitors were either legacy competitors from the first time the show ran, or they were people who played in the fan leagues, and so they were just around the channel anyways. They signed up to compete. And one of the people that I reached out to was a gentleman by the name of Ben Rayner. Now, if you guys were fans of the Schmodown, you guys may have seen him. He was a huge fan of the show. He was a part of the after show scene connected to that. That's how I got the chance to know him. We met on a after show that unfortunately went down in flames eventually, but that does not affect someone like Ben, who was always just very excited to be there and a part of the fun and talking about the things he loved, whether it be the Schmodown or movies. And Ben, I'd reached out to Ben. I'd offer him an invitation off of the previous good experiences that I'd had working with him. And just as an offhand thing, I was like, hey, I know you run a channel. I know you have a couple of guys who run it with you. Give the invitation to them as well. If they'd be interested in trying, I would love to have them come in and play. Now, unfortunately, if you know Ben, you know that at the time of this upload, we're just off of 3 months ago, he unfortunately passed away. And we never got the chance to have him here in the show. But I am incredibly excited that the people who work with him most often in the time before his passing are here to participate in the show, and we finally were able to get them in order to compete. Normally we do this separately, but I'm going to bring them both in. Making their debuts on the show, we have Don Tucker and Joseph Boros. Guys, welcome to the show. Don, I'll start with you. How are you feeling about finally getting to be here tonight for your first match? Because you already have had the chance to be in a couple matches as a judge.
Yeah, I did get to judge a couple. I'm excited, man. A little nervous, but excited for sure. I've been watching a lot of the old episodes and trying to keep up, and I'm really excited to do this. Love it. So,
absolutely. And then Joe, down to you. Unfortunately, we never got the chance to have you in here in person to see something, but you are here to play tonight. So how are you feeling coming in?
I'm feeling good. Just here to have a good time and see how this goes.
Absolutely. Well, it's always exciting.
Going down.
As you said, it's one of the big draws in terms of who I was reaching out to was, again, for a very brief period of time, I had involvement in one of the Schmodown after shows that, as I said, it went down in a horrific set of flames by the end there. But it introduced me to a lot of people who I had never met who were outside of the fan league setup, which is sort of where I had been since the early days, the foundation of the fan leagues. And of course, Ben was one of those people. I have no idea what he said to you or how on earth he convinced you to sign up for this. But I guess if you just had, what was it that sort of, I guess I'll phrase it in a more positive way. What was it about working with Ben that would have convinced you to come into this if he was the one who extended that offer to you guys and not me directly, obviously, because I did not talk to you before we set up that group?
Well, I think regardless, if you come to either me or Don and you say, hey, you guys want to argue with each other, we'll probably take you up on that offer. But also,
is this one of our shows? Are you sure?
Yeah. And then if Ben asks you to do anything, he had a way of making you want to say yes.
Yeah, we all trusted Ben. I mean, anytime Ben suggested something, especially to watch or check out. He definitely took that. So, yeah, no, it wasn't hard to convince us to do this at home.
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited to have you guys here tonight. Let's go ahead and get into this. Movie Battleground is a game that is a best of 5 rounds. It is a first to 3 points wins the match. Each round of debate is worth 1 point. If a competitor picks up the first 3 points in a row, that will be a victory by knockout. If after the end of 4 rounds it is a 2-2 tie, we do have a tiebreaker question. That is called the blind round. I think it's also called a legal form of torture if you have to do it on your first match, but we will worry about that should we have to go there. In terms of the 4 questions, you guys have had them. You've had the chance to prepare. Each question will go like this. You will get 60 seconds to open your argument. That'll be followed by 2 minutes to expand, explain, rebut. However you choose to go about that 2 minutes is all yours. If you wanted to sit silently for 2 minutes, I wouldn't blame you. I'd call it a time waste, but I wouldn't blame you. We have a 4-minute open discussion, followed by that where you guys will get to go back and forth, trade blows, and get in there. And then you guys will have 1 minute each to close out the round. Following that, I do have 3 judges backstage in the form of Chris, Richie, and Alec. They will join us on screen at the end of each round. And based off what you guys have said in the debate, will make their deliberation on who gets the point. All right. With all that said, do we have any questions or are we good to go? All right.
I think I'm ready.
And so jumping into this, as we talked about, through Ben was where the inception of getting you guys into the league came from. And originally this was supposed to be a 3-person match. You guys do have a third on the channel in Josh, who, if you guys checked out one of our previous matches, has also had the chance to be here as a judge. Scheduling made getting him in this match difficult, but he will be making his debut in the near future. But when we did write this match, we had 5 questions, and I figured that the best way to go about a first question was to offer some sort of tribute question to Ben because he couldn't be here, unfortunately, with us. And something that I did learn in being able to check out a bit of your guys' stream that you did in honor of him, where I do have to say congratulations to you guys. You raised a great bit of money in support of helping others who dealt with the same issues Ben did. Is that Back to the Future was one of, if not his favorite movies of all time. And it is a movie where literally I feel like scene by scene, people can break this thing down and just talk about how excellent it is. So I did give you guys a whole trilogy, but even with Josh's answer, that's no longer here. As you guys probably should have, you all picked from the first film. So the question doesn't even really matter in that sense. It is, what is the best scene in the Back to the Future trilogy? But we're talking about the first film because that is where the best stuff is. So behind the scenes, based on essentially a coin flip, because there was 3, we did a dice roll, but, to make it more even. Don won out, so he was deemed the favorite. That means absolutely nothing except you get to pick what questions you go first on. So he's going first on 2 and 4. Joe, you're going to go first on this question. And as I go ahead and bring in your timer, I'm going to wish you guys the best of luck on your debut match. Joe, the time will start for you. You have 1 minute when you begin speaking.
Now, I would like to make a point of reference that while we did pick things from the first movie, they are also scenes from the second movie. Now, the question I propose to you is, who invented rock and roll? Was it Alan Freed? Was it Chuck Berry? Elvis? Wrong. It was Marty McFly at the Enchantment Under the Sea dance with the guitar. Everybody knows that. Not to mention, when they go back to it in the second movie, you get to see Marty protecting Marty from the bad guys, that Marty got sent after Marty because Marty stole the book from Biff, who got it from Biff. It's some real deep thinking stuff. All right? And the part of this scene that most people don't appreciate is that what it really is it's Marty expressing his joy, his relief, his happiness that he's not going away forever. This was Marty coming out of his shell and shedding his inhibitions.
And time. Wow, the movie's never made more sense than in this moment right here. John, over to you. You have 1 minute on the clock when ready.
Okay. Obviously, that is a great scene. The Johnny Be Good scene. Nobody can argue it's a great scene. But we're talking the best scene in the trilogy. And the best scene in the trilogy just happens to be also the most pivotal scene in the trilogy. We have to get Lorraine away from Marty. George has to punch Biff and get her attention. And this is what ultimately saves the future and the franchise in general. Without this scene, we don't get the franchise. We don't get the trilogy. So this is obviously the best scene. And not just because it's the most pivotal, but because everything leading up to this scene is the best part. Is the best part of the movie. Johnny Be Good is just Michael J. Fox having fun. So I think if we're talking about the best scene from the trilogy, it's obviously this scene. I don't think there's a debate. I will yield my time.
All right. So with that, we're going to go back over to you, Joseph. Time starts when you begin speaking. 2 minutes on the clock.
Okay, you said that the scene that secured the trilogy was the punch, but even up until after that moment, Marty still wasn't in the picture. It wasn't until they kissed after the dance that they got back together. It's actually why Marty, after the punch, ran up to them and told them that they had to get back inside, because he knew that that's the only way that he would survive. So your whole premise is built on a lie. You're standing on an army of straw men, Don, and surfing on a sea of straw men is not a great way. Ask that little pig, the first one, built the house out of hay, doesn't go over well, okay? Now, the truth is that if it wasn't for the dance scene, then we wouldn't have had any of it. There wouldn't have been a future to steal, a future to recover, a future to rediscover. The whole premise of the first two movies is all based around securing that moment. That moment wasn't the punch, which was important and did lead up to it. But the pivotal moment, the defining moment, that was the kiss after the dance. And I'll yield the rest of my time.
All right. Go ahead and play my favorite game where we try and bump the timer up as evenly as possible. There we go. Perfect. Only, a few seconds of dead air. Don, back over to you, sir. 2 minutes on the clock when ready.
So we don't even get to your scene again without my scene. They don't even get into the dance unless George wins Lorraine over and away from Marty. We got to get her away from Marty. It's his mother. We can't have that. So without this scene, we do not even get to your scene where. So I don't believe that that's even a good argument. Not to mention that this is the scene that gives George the confidence. He finally gets the confidence, and it's because he's seeing Biff, going after Lorraine, and he finally loses it, and he can't take it. And Marty's the one that gives him that confidence, and that's a great a great twist to the story, and how it wasn't even Marty that really talked him into it at that point. It was him reacting that made that happen, and it was real. So, and we get out of that the great Biff scene at the end where he's waxing down Marty's truck. So again, without this scene, we do not even get to your scene. This is the best scene for those reasons. It's the most character developing scenes as far as George McFly, and even Biff, because then we see him pretty much go backwards. We see George go up and him go backwards. So I don't really. I yield my time from that because I don't really have much else on that.
All right.
Fair play, sir. Fair play.
Let's go.
All right.
4 minutes back and forth, sir.
All right. So we're going to go into the 4-minute open discussion period. The timer will start back up when the first competitor speaks. All we always ask is just to give each other a chance to breathe. Don't cut each other off at the first sentence you say. But other than that, just have fun with it. You'll find a rhythm eventually. And again, I know that debating on scene does limit things a little bit. So if at an earlier point you do reach a time where you feel like you've said all you can say, don't worry, just let me know. But with that said, Tomer
That's
will
fine.
start when the first player speaks.
Okay, I'd like to start off with saying that I also don't support Marty being around his mother like that. I think that's very creepy.
Of course.
I think that's universally agreed upon. I like Game of
Yeah,
Thrones,
of course.
but that's a bit much. Okay. All scenes in movies build towards other scenes. So yes, if it wasn't for your scene, you wouldn't have got to my scene. But if it wasn't for any scenes early in a movie, you generally won't get the later scenes because movies go linearly. You generally watch them in the order that they're shown.
I don't think that's a good point, but that's fair. That's how you want to go. That's fair.
And your scene does give George confidence, but my scene gives Marty confidence, and the whole story is about Marty.
That's all. That's it. Okay, so come on, Johnny B. It's just Michael J. Fox having fun again. It's a fun scene, and obviously, I'm not putting the scene down in the sense that I'm saying it's a bad scene. Obviously, it's a great scene, but it's not the emotional. It's not the same emotional scene that my scene is with. Like I said, the confidence that it gives, the emotion we see in George as he's building up the anger, as he's watching Biff go after Lorraine. It's overall just the better scene. Your scene is more fun. My scene is the better scene in this movie, especially, but in the trilogy.
What makes Back to the Future so great? Is it the writing? Is it the directing? Or is it just the general je ne sais quoi, the fun, the vibe of the movie?
It's all of it.
Michael J. Fox enjoying the character. My scene not only epitomizes that, but it also has the emotional weight of being the moment where he doesn't die and disappear forever. That is a very pinnacle and important emotional scene. It's the one that allows the rest of the movies to happen. Just remember, Don, this is an oldie where I come from.
Sir.
It's a blues rift and B. Watch me for the changes.
Oh, come on.
Just try to keep up.
I love this. I love that scene, man. But again, it doesn't compare. It doesn't compare to the Biff scene, the punch. That's what the whole movie is leading up to. That is what the whole plan is about in the movie that him and George are coming up with. It's what the entire movie is about.
Except
it's leading up
one.
to that scene. But the second one.
The second
one doesn't count right now.
What?
The second one does not count in the first movie.
It's the same scene.
From a different perspective.
Yes. Still very relevant.
It doesn't change the emotion of that scene from the first movie though when you first see it.
Maybe not to you.
Wow. Okay.
Watching
like
Marty knock out Marty and Biff lose his shit and run away is worth it all. They did it before Marvel. That's all I'm saying. Hmm? They did it before Marvel.
There's no way in any universe at that point before Marty steps in that George and Lorraine are going to end up together.
Well, yeah, there would have been if he didn't.
And he sets that entire thing up to be to happen the way it has to happen to your scene.
Well, but by that logic, though, it was always meant to happen, and none of the scenes actually really matter. He just almost ruined it. It was going to happen if he didn't step in. Him stepping in is what ruined the whole thing.
How did him stepping in ruin it?
Because he was the one who got hit instead of George. That's the whole premise of the movie.
I still think the emotional buildup of George in that scene is that's what's supposed to happen.
And time. See, this is why we bring other people in. No one in the history of this show has ever said je ne sais quoi. This is why we bring other people in. All right, guys, you have 1 minute left. You have 1 minute left on the round. Joe, you're up first. Time starts when you begin speaking.
Okay, first, I'd like to reiterate, I do not support incest. It's a very important topic. I just want to make sure we're all in agreement on that. Okay? Now, like I said, the movie, the tone, the feel of the movie is what matters most. Anybody can write a script, but a script that just doesn't come alive It doesn't matter what the words are. It's how they're portrayed. It's how it makes you feel. And every time you see the Johnny Be Good scene in that movie, you feel. Now, you might not understand that, but your kids will love it. I yield the rest of my time.
All right. Go ahead and bump that forward there. Don, once the clock turns over to 0 in just a second as I finish talking, you can begin.
We're talking about what the best scene is in the trilogy. And the best scene is the most emotional scene. It's the most pivotal scene. It is the punch. It is the lead up. It is the plan. And it is the execution of George McFly and Marty McFly that save him and ultimately save his family. And I don't really see. I understand Joe's argument. I just don't see it. I think, again, it's a fun scene. It's just not the best scene. The emotional ties to this scene, and I mean, this is the scene we all root for. This is a scene that when we're watching this movie, this is the scene where everybody's like, yes, George finally did it. George finally did it. He stood up for himself. He got Lorraine. He saved Marty. It is the best scene. And I just don't think that the fun of the Johnny Be Good scene wins out over the emotion of the punch scene. So I will yield my time.
All right. Guys, very good first round. Considering that question was intended for 3 people, you made the most of it. Because it's hard. That's a hard thing to try and debate scenes in film.
It's hard to really just talk about the one scene and one. Yeah. No, it's fine.
I'm going to go ahead and sit you guys in the back. We'll bring in the judges for the deliberation here. There's nothing really to fact check or look up in this round. These guys were pretty dead on the entire way, with the exception of the fact that I'm also, from a show perspective, going to back Joe here. We do not support incest. We support season 1 through 7 of Game of Thrones, but we do not support incest.
Yeah.
Just really want to make that clear, because I'm from Florida and there's a lot of people that would support it down here, but I personally don't. I don't identify with that.
Texas have to,
Yeah, I mean, I'm not.
You have to make it clear that you're not one of those. So, all right.
Yeah, I'm from Australia, but there's Tasmania, so they're a bit weird. But I'm not.
Oh, right, you have your Florida, yeah. So
yeah. Gold Coast, my Florida, but yeah, which I live near. But yeah, still.
All right. Well, Chris, I'm going to go to you first, as concise as you can get it for me. Who gets what was the main selling point?
This is a fun match already starting. I went back and forth. Different some insane stuff for now, and Joe mind fucked me a little bit, thinking his way a little bit, judging here. But I went with Don in the end, and he defined what the defining moment of Back to the Future is. He decided the gigantic other punch of everything coming all together, and he won the argument in the end. Great debate so far, we'll say.
All right, Richie, down to you.
Yeah, it was fun to listen. This debate was fun to listen to. Yeah, very, very, very polite debate, I would say. One of the more polite debates to listen to. Now, I also went with Don here. I just think, while the Johnny Be Good scene, that I think the Joseph did a good job putting over how it's fun, but I think Don did a good job explaining why the George punch was pivotal to the movie and why it was more important. So I ultimately sided with Don.
All right, guys, thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and put you in the back and bring the competitors back in for question number 2, and we're going to run you guys the gambit through this entire debut match. We're going to upgrade you. We're going to go from scenes to whole movies. Speaking of, all anyone can talk about right now for positive and negative reasons is Marvel, specifically within the MCU, following the release of Ant-Man and the Wasp and the very soon impending release of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. And the MCU is a thing. I feel like we're starting to see a moment where, not maybe from a filmmaking perspective, but certainly from a critical perspective, an outsider's perspective, it is imploding on itself a little bit, because at this point there is so much within it that you're almost at the point where you're kind of asking the question, does this kind of justify itself? Like why is this a thing that exists in the MCU? And I think people are starting to look at it differently, since we've never had a franchise of this level. But something that we've also learned is, as time goes on, the responses to things change. We recently had a debate a couple of weeks ago in which a Spielberg question was asked, and somebody brought up the fact that Hook is a movie that at the time received hugely negative reviews, but now it's looked at very positively. And so there is a change in perspective. And so we're going to force you guys to put up what should be the change in perspective here. The question is, what is the most underrated Marvel film of all time? Now, they did both choose MCU films, which is why I've chosen to phrase it that way. But as is one of the rules with the new season, there is no MCU category. It is just Marvel, or same goes with DC. But we got two MCU films here, and two that I definitely think there are some qualities in to argue for. So I'm curious to see where we go. Dawn, I'm going to go to you first on this one. Timer starts when you begin speaking for your opening minute.
So I went with a movie that I think is underrated, because I think it actually does have a good developing story for a character that we get a really great origin movie for. And this movie really, I think, extends on his story and where he's coming from as a character when we meet him. And that's Iron Man 2. They introduce Whiplash, Mickey Rourke. We get a great fight scene on the F1 circuit as the cars are going by, and the great scene with Happy going through the race there. And I don't think it's the strongest, but I do think it's still an important pivotal movie for Iron Man and for that character. And Robert Downey Jr. kills it. I mean, he really is great in this.
And time.
Yeah.
All right, Joe, over to you. 1 minute on the clock.
When you're talking about the most underrated Marvel movies, you'd have to look down to the ones that were universally panned, the ones that people almost ignored and forgot about, only to be thrown back into the spotlight years later by things connecting back to those very moments and pivotal characters spawning from them. That's why Avengers Age of Ultron is by far the most underrated Marvel movie, because not only did it give us James Spader's Ultron, who is one of the greatest actors to step foot in a Marvel film, it also set the future for the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. Still going today. There were foreshadowing abound. This is what started then.
All right. Iron Man 2 versus Avengers Age of Ultron is what's on the table. Dom, we go back over to you. 2 minutes on the clock when ready.
So Iron Man 2 is basically about what if the Iron Man suit was real, and what if the government wanted to take it, and what if Tony Stark was the creator of it. And they establish who Tony is in the first movie, and then in this movie we really see what would happen. And then we see what the government would do if they did take over and they tried to get a contractor to do it. And how Tony would fight for his property. And again, the introduction of Whiplash, trying to be this foe that Tony stole from his father, the original plans. And we get that story, which is a pretty big twist in Tony Stark's story, that his father actually stole all of this technology. And we get the great dynamic. We get that great scene with them, Gary Shandling and can't remember his name, but the Hammer and Tony in the council meeting with the senators and stuff, and such a great scene. And I just think overall that this movie is underrated because of what it really brings for that character, what we ultimately see play out between him and Steve Rogers in Civil War. So I believe that this movie is a pivotal story that needed to be told about this character and who he is, in order to get us to where we get to him in Civil War. And Age of Ultron is ultimately the worst use of a villain ever, and I just can't imagine it being underrated when they completely has flopped that.
And time. All right, Joe, back over to you. 2 minutes.
Interesting how you mentioned Iron Man 2 as the movie that set up Civil War. When the groundwork for Civil War was quite blatantly laid in Age of Ultron. Not only that, we got the foreshadowing of Cap lifting the hammer and wielding Mjolnir in Endgame. Where? In Age of Ultron. We got the setup for the fantastic first season of What If. Where? In Age of Ultron. We got the Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, the introduction of mutants, although they couldn't call them that at the time, into the MCU. Where? In Age of Ultron. The Scarlet Witch blasting everybody's minds, making them see their futures or pasts in some cases, all which paid off at some point, future in the MCU. Everything came to fruition. And not to mention the end credit scene of Thanos standing up, putting the gauntlet on, and saying, "Fine, I'll do it myself." Everything hinged on this film. This movie was the turning point. This was the suit of armor that Tony built. This was what changed. And I'll yield the rest of my time.
All right, we're going to go ahead and jump into the 2-minute open debate discussion, or 4-minute, open discussion round. The timer will start back up when the first competitor speaks.
Okay, so here's the problem with Age of Ultron. One, again, they completely blew a great actor playing a great villain, and they just completely blew it. Then the ending, I mean, come on, it's okay, but then they pick up a city and drop it. It's okay. And not only that, we also don't get the fruition of the Hulk and Black Widow. We never know what happens with that. That just completely goes away, their little love interest that they have. The reason that Iron Man 2 is part of the setup for Civil War is because Civil War is ultimately where the opposite of where Tony and Steve start. Steve starts as a 100% dedicated to the military, government. He believes in everything they do. Iron Man, because of this movie, sees what the government would do if they tried to get their hands on this type of technology, and does not trust the government. And ultimately, in Civil War, it's the change. It's Iron Man is now saying, no, we have to do this. We have to.
That is because of Age of Ultron. That is because of the failure of him to be able to protect the planet.
He's always been. What is he always dealing with? He's dealing with New York.
But the reason,
not Ultron. It's
the
New York that always haunts him.
No. After that, it was New York
is what
until he created Ultron, and then it was Ultron. And
that was when he finally realized he went too far. Yes, but what haunts him is New York, not Ultron. What haunts him is New York. That's what
New York is why he thought we needed to be protected. That's why he created Ultron. Ultron is what's keeping him up at night ever
It's one of
since.
the greatest stories told over an arc of movies I've ever seen. It's two characters coming from complete opposites and then becoming the opposite, and ultimately fighting each other over that difference because
the biggest difference is Iron Man 2. While it did introduce some characters, it did have Whiplash, looking for his boy. It did have major turning points in Tony's story. But Age of Ultron had major turning points in the entire MCU.
Not to mention we get the new. Not to mention that we get the new Rhodey, Don Cheadle.
But Iron Man 2 was never panned. It was never seen as a bad movie. So it's hard to say that it's underrated. If it was Iron Man 3, sure. But
Iron Man 2 is definitely not considered one of the best.
No, but not one of the best. But it's not considered like Thor: The Dark World.
Yeah, I'd say it's pretty close to that overall.
I feel like at the time when Age of Ultron came out, it was seen as a worse movie than Iron Man 2. And now I do not think that the majority of people feel that way. I believe with time and with all the links to the past that have occurred, people have become more appreciative of the movie, which would then make it underrated. By definition.
I think underrated is just a movie that's not really talked about. And when you talk about MCU movies, Iron Man 2 does not come up either. It is not a movie that people are like, oh yeah, that's a great, you got to watch that one. People are not saying that about Iron Man 2 either. So that I don't think that argument really holds up. I don't think either one of these movies are that movie that people are saying, oh no, you have to watch that movie.
Well, no, I mean. Although nowadays, any MCU movie
we don't get anything. And really, the best thing, one of the best things we get out of that movie is that Steve Rogers can move Mjolnir.
Yeah,
really
that's
one of the
a great
best
moment.
Things we get out of that movie.
The Avengers assemble.
Probably the best moment
so
in the movie. But it's probably the best moment in the whole movie. That end fight scene, come on, man, it is not great. Just dropping the city down, it's. You
mean
and time.
Civil War.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and get into the closing minute here. Don, you're up first. Time starts when you begin speaking.
So I'm going to go again. Iron Man 2 is the most underrated because we do get some of the best character introductions with Whiplash and Hammer and the Senator, that Gary Shandling. We also again get really key pivotal moments in Iron Man's storyline that ultimately lead up 20 movies away. We realize it's going to happen into this ultimate moment where he has to make a decision. We get Don Cheadle as Rhodey. It's one of the best character changes, introductions in the MCU. And again, Age of Ultron just falls short. It's just not a good movie overall. It was just a letdown of an Avengers movie that we were all looking forward to after the first one. So, as far as underrated goes, Iron Man 2 definitely is the most underrated because it really does get overlooked as one of the best MCU movies, and especially for Tony Stark, his character arc throughout the MCU overall. It's a very important.
Sorry, that is time. Apologies there. The timer had an issue load, so I had to reset it there. Sorry about that. All right, then Joe, over to you. Final minute.
Sure. Why do we have the Sokovia Accords? Because of the events in Age of Ultron. The literal catalyst for Civil War. The defining act, the assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand. This was the match that lit the powder keg. Now, Age of Ultron set up Civil War, Captain America's worthiness, the whole fight scene in Endgame, Tony's fears and sacrifices, the entire Endgame of the Infinity Saga. It set up the Scarlet Witch, which WandaVision gave us Vision, which now is White Vision, which is probably going to give us the West Coast Avengers, gave us Ragnarok, Black Panther, Black Widow, the movie it set up, all in the Visions, the Hawkeye series, Old Cap, and the name Endgame, because we're in the Endgame now. The only thing it didn't set was the table. So come on, man.
Wow.
I'll yield the rest of my time.
Wow.
All right. I'm going to go
Good round,
ahead,
sir.
answer
Good
you guys
round.
in the back, and I will bring in the judges here. Again, pretty clean round, all things considered, so not much to check up on. Richie, I go to you first. Who gets your vote, and what was the main selling point?
A good round. I think ultimately sided with Don again, just because I think he did a good job at explaining why his movie is the most underrated movie. I think Joe kind of spent more time talking about why his movie was more maybe important to the MCU as a whole and what it set up, and it didn't really focus in on why Age of Ultron was a good movie overall, and why maybe it was a better movie than Iron Man 2. So I went with Don.
Okay, Alec, down to you.
I'm gonna actually take Richie's argument, but I'm gonna put it again for Joe. I think Joe's argument for what everything that is set up going forward into the rest of the MCU is what makes that movie underrated. And I think Joe explained that perfectly.
Okay, which means Chris will go to you for the split vote. Who gets it, and what was the main selling point?
Yeah, this was back and forth, but I went with the one I heard more from about his movie, where the other one I felt like described the first half hour of the movie. I went with Joe because he implied the implication of everything connected to Ultron. He's saying why they're underrated. They all connect, that people will years from now will see it as the connection to everything. So Joe got it for me.
All right. Thank you, guys. I'm going to go ahead and sit you in the back, and we'll go ahead and move on to question number 3. And we're going to go ahead and kind of, again, we're running through the gambit tonight. We're going to go from movies to hypotheticals of movies. If you want to know what's not hypothetical, Hollywood going back near Mel Brooks films and trying to turn them into something. In the last year alone, we had Paws of Fury, which it honestly wasn't even a horrible film, but it's just a weird idea to try and take Blazing Saddles and remake it into an animated kids film. Like, I don't know who thought Blazing Saddles was the one that needed that, but they did it, and it was mediocre at best, quite frankly. But we had that. We also have Hulu doing a mini-series sequel to History of the World. So clearly Mel Brooks is something that in one way or another is coming back into the public conscious. And so the question here is, if one of Mel Brooks's films got a sequel, which one should it be? And we'll go ahead and jump into this. Joe, you're up first on this question once again, so I'll give you the timer, and it'll start when you begin speaking.
What better movie to make a sequel of than a movie about a movie that has spawned sequel after sequel after sequel after sequel? I could keep doing that a few more times, but for sake of time, I'm just going to not. You see, when you're talking about franchises that are globally known, there are none on par with Star Wars, which is why the Mel Brooks movie that needs a sequel is Spaceballs. Obviously. I mean, it's hot, too hot. And surprisingly, Rick Moranis just started coming back to Hollywood again. My, what perfect timing, Rick. Welcome back. Don't spend all that Mint Mobile money in one place now. We're going to need you for Spaceballs. I yield my time.
I mean, theoretically, if you want to get him in Spaceballs, wouldn't you want him to spend all that Mint Mobile money in one place? It'd
That
make
is
him more
true.
likely to say yes.
That is true. But he needs to be able to still afford a place in Hollywood to stay while he makes the movie.
That's also true. Well, now it's 2023. They'll probably shoot it in Vancouver for tax breaks. Anyways, John, we'll go back to you. You have 1 minute on the clock. Time starts when you begin speaking.
So when I think of Mel Brooks, I think of quirkiness. I think of craziness. I think of one-liners. I think of History of the World Part 1. It's by far my favorite Mel Brooks movie. He takes us through history in such an insane and only way that Mel Brooks can do it. this movie obviously needs a sequel. Just it's literally the epitome of what you think of when you think of Mel Brooks. I think, and again, it's the quirkiness, it's the craziness, and it's all the great hits from history, which I will go way into more once we get into it. But this is the quintessential Mel Brooks movie to me. It's the greatest one-liner movie of all time, in my opinion. It's just one of the funniest movies that he's ever made, and I would love to see an actual sequel to this movie.
And time. All right, and as I always like to do, any question, any answers that anyone in our audience may try and pitch a fit in the comment section about, I will answer your questions ahead of time. As I aforementioned, History of the World is getting a spin-off series on Hulu. However, that is not a film, and as such, because we are debating a movie, you can't argue that when compared a miniseries to a movie, they are two different things. They would be made two different ways. As such, the answer was accepted. Either way, we're going to go ahead and jump into Spaceballs for 2 minutes on the clock, Jeb, when you begin speaking.
History of the World Part 1. It was made to be part 1 of a movie that never was made. Jews in Space, a Hitler's opera being made in 2023. That kind of non-PC stuff wouldn't fly in the movies these days, Don. Not in these United States. Now, Spaceballs, much more PC of a film. There's only a little bit of cursing. I hope that it's all right. But there's a few assholes. They're surrounded by assholes. The entire crew are assholes. There's a few jokes that might not fly. They're combing the desert. Your Schwartz is as big as mine, would probably fly under the radar enough to get past. But you have Mr. Coffee. You have the radar. The bloop, bloop, bloop. The sweeps. The whip, whip, whip. Only one man would dare give me the raspberries. Lone Star. There is a rife ground for sequels to be made. You could have Barf, the Bone Wars. Everyone needs a Mog. Everybody's got, anybody who has a dog knows that friendship, that loyal companionship that can only be given by a dog or a Mog who can be his own best friend. There's so many reasons why we need a Spaceballs movie, if not just because of the amount of material they have to work from, if not just for how fun and how original it would be, and how much other sci-fi properties they could borrow from, like the original did with Alien and the diner scene. But also, we cannot forget merchandising. Lots and lots of merchandising. Think of the lunchboxes, the koozies, the t-shirts, the hats.
And time. All right. Man, we really need to get a merch store for the show. That'd be a cheap way to get money. Dawn, back over to you. Time starts when you begin speaking.
I can't believe I'm actually going to argue against Spaceballs. Okay, so listen. The reason that we need to make History of the World Part 2 is it's obvious. You don't get the forefathers having a circle jerk and eventually humping the ground for 2 minutes. It's one of the funniest jokes. We don't get the cave people and their entertainment of having one of their people get eaten by a brontosaurus for some reason instead of a T-Rex or something. I don't understand that one. Still hilarious. And he throws a spear into his stomach. Not to mention the great joke of the original with the first artist comes the first art critic. Great joke. That's such a funny joke. And how they discover singing in the caveman times with him hitting in the foot with a rock. Such a great joke. Come on. There's so many one-liner jokes in this movie. I can go into them all. We get the Spanish Inquisition. We get It's Great to Be a King. We get the First Supper as far with the Jesus joke. Where Jesus? Yes. He's like, what? But Jesus. Come on. It's one of the greatest. It's literally one of the best setup movies ever with one line joke. Not to mention we get Gregory Hines doing his Ethiopian Shimchan, the philosopher, where he's you're a bullshit artist. Did you try to bullshit last? Joe, I don't like your faces right now. I'll tell you that. Not to mention, we get through. we get the through line. I lost my train of thought. I yield my time. I lost my train of thought. I'm going back and forth.
All right. That'll be
I did it. I had
time on that. We're going to go ahead and go into the open discussion round for your 4 minutes when the first person speaks.
I'd like to start off by saying the reason the Brontosaurus hate that caveman is because his name was Herb. Also, the reason why Spaceballs is better is because there's a giant robot lady that sucks off a planet.
That's not an argument.
That's a very good argument.
That is not an argument.
1, 2, 3, 4. That's the kind of code an idiot would put on his matched luggage.
Well, we can go back and forth joke to joke. That's
funny.
Not even this show.
You don't look Jewish.
It's a Mel Brooks movie. I'm not going to go back and forth joke to joke with you on every single one. We can do that all day.
Isn't that the point?
Sure. You want to? That's what you want to make this about.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes, go ahead.
How do you feel about Rick Moranis?
Oh, come on. He's one of the
you
greatest
like him?
ever.
Would you like to see him make more movies? Do you want him to have work? Do you want him to be able to feed his children? Oh, so then maybe we should make Spaceballs too. Thank you, Don. I agree.
That's not going to fly either. Anyway, just because you want to see Rick Moranis back in a movie does not make it the better movie. He can put Rick Moranis in anything. It doesn't have to be Spaceballs. He can put Rick Moranis in anything. Rick Moranis is Rick Moranis. He's gonna be the comedy genius that he is.
Hey Don, what's that poster behind you? I can't hear you. Is that a Star Wars poster? Uh-oh.
Don, I paused the clock. Don, can you speak? I can't hear you. Yeah, you have no audio coming through. All right, guys. Sorry about that. We had a brief tech issue there. Initially, I thought it was part of the bit, but then we lost Don's audio completely there. It took us a couple minutes to get it reset. So needless to say, the train of thought was completely destroyed. So whatever they were just saying for you watching the video less than 10 seconds ago, let's see if they say it again. Guys, you have 2.5 minutes left in the open debate. Whoever wants to speak first, timer will start back up for you.
So Don, as I was saying, now that I remember, what is that poster behind you there?
It's Star Wars, sir.
Again,
emotional ties to a movie does not make the movie a better movie. We're talking about what we want to see more, and I want to see him go through history again.
And I agree that you want to see that.
No,
but I agree that the majority of people.
When you think of Mel Brooks, is this not one of your top Mel Brooks movies? Come on.
Oh, I love it. But the majority of people, if you talk about Mel Brooks movies, they'll name Spaceballs, Blazing Saddles, and Robin Hood Men in Tights. They'll never get to History of the World Part 1.
Blazing Saddles,
I think it's fantastic.
Not for a sequel.
No, I'm saying those are the movies that people know. Non-giant movie fans don't know Mel Brooks' catalog past that. They don't know Silent Movie. They don't know High Anxiety. They only know those three. So for a movie to have a successful sequel, it would make sense to do one of the most well-known movies based off of, once again, one of the most well-known franchises of all time. There are people who hate the prequels.
Most people don't know that much about movies, so that the majority rules that argument doesn't really hold up. Most people don't know that much about movies and watch that many movies. They watch a couple movies a year, maybe, or they watch Netflix movies. It's not the same thing.
And what draws people in is seeing things that they know about. The reason people are going to go is because they know something. They've seen it. They relate to it. A director, an actor, a topic, a sequel. It's the whole point of having sequels, is because people have seen the first one. If enough people haven't seen the first one, what's the point of making a sequel?
If I want to see Mel Brooks be Mel Brooks, and I think the best way that he's able to do that is when he's doing these type of one-liner skit movies where he just is having fun with premises that he can make funny. I mean, the Inquisition, that is one of the greatest scenes of all time in a comedy.
The Inquisition, what a show!
Yeah, I mean, come on, it's one of the greatest numbers. The divers and stuff, the synchronized swimmers, the Roman scene, him doing the bits in front of Caesar, talking about how he's a fat pig and stuff. It's Mel Brooks at his best when he's able to be adaptive and just have fun with different time periods in history. It's his best work.
Time.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to go ahead and jump into the 1 minute closing. Joe, you're back up first. Time starts when you begin speaking.
You are right. There are great bits and scenes in History of the World Part 1. It's like a variety hour, which is why it's better suited for TV than a film sequel, because it is not a linear progression of a story for the most part. It jumps to different sections, different parts, different scenes. It doesn't have to be conjoined as that way. Whereas Spaceballs is a linear tale, beginning and end. It has room for prequels. It has room for sequels. It has room for spin-offs. It could be the tale of the Morg homeworld. It could be about Princess and the Prince, their life together. It could be about Druidia and its people. It could be about anything. It could be about the first Spaceballs. It could be about how all these assholes got aboard the ship to begin with. It could be about the formation of the raspberries. It could be about literally anything. It could be a yogurt spinoff. You know, just think, Don. Merchandising.
And time. All right, Don, back over to you. Final minute of the round. One ready.
Mel Brooks is getting to the point in his career where he cannot do many more projects. And if we want to get the best out of what we can with him, that we have left for him, willing to do more projects, the best way to do it is let him be adaptive, let him be creative, let him have fun, let him tell crazy stories. There's really nowhere to go with Spaceballs. Spaceballs, yes, it's a more linear movie in the story sense, yes, but there's nowhere to go with it. Yes, you can make spin-offs and sequels and prequels and all that stuff, but it's not Spaceballs. It's just not. It does. Part 2 of History of the World doesn't have to be part 1. It has to be a continuation of Mel Brooks being able to adapt and use his comedy and his genius in writing comedy as a tool that we get to see as much of his mind as we can before we don't get much more with him. I think that would be the best way to use him at this point.
And time.
Utilize his time. Sorry.
All right, guys. Great round there. You can see the passion coming out for something like this. You guys did a great job there. I'm going to go ahead and sit you in the back and bring forth the judges to jump into this. The only fact check that I have for this round is I don't know what possibly couldn't make a good sequel for Blazing Saddles. What do you guys mean? That movie is perfect for the culture of 2023. I think it's exactly what we probably need nowadays.
I agree.
Okay, so now with that said, I guess let's pick the best of the second best answers here. No, jokes aside, Alec, I'll go to you first. Who gets your vote, and what was the main selling point for the argument?
I went Joe. I think he was able to map out like where a sequel would go. Like gave multiple like different kinds of ideas for Spaceballs. So I went with Joe.
Okay, Chris, down to you.
This definitely had one of the best moments here so far for a laugh. But yeah, I went with Joe. He got into my head a little bit with like the merchandise, we did the spin out, we did this stuff with the that feel that the other one did a good job. He just didn't build enough of where we could go with History of the World Part 2, where Joe went all over the place with an idea Similar to Star Wars. Yeah. He got into my head once
All
again.
right. Guys, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and sit you in the back. We'll go ahead and jump into the fourth question here tonight. And as I said, we had a pretty good run of the gambit here, right? We gave you guys something uber specific. We let you guys talk in whole about a film. We gave you guys an underrated question, which if the more you speak to people, you'll learn is like the bane of some people's existence. They hate arguing something like that. We argued hypotheticals. And now we're going to the most fun part of the game. You guys are going to get to fucking shit on something, especially something I'm going to guess that's a part of something you guys love, which makes the passion even further.
Definitely.
What's a better setup? The question is, what is the worst Star Wars film of all time? And God help us if there aren't options. And you guys picked some good ones. That said, Don, you're up first on this one, so the timer will go to you. It starts when you begin speaking.
When you think of Luke Skywalker, you think of hope after Episode 6. You think of the one that didn't give in to the dark side, the one that would never give in to the dark side. And what we see in The Last Jedi is one of the worst uses of a character you can ever. I don't know how it's forgivable. All because he sees a vision of what might happen. He gives up on his nephew and tries to kill him. That's Luke Skywalker, the guy that just fought for his father to come back to the light side after all the years that he had been on the dark side, not even thinking about going to the dark side or maybe could go to the dark side. He was the dark side. I just don't see how that is a great choice for one of the most beloved characters in Star Wars, which is why The Last Jedi is the worst.
Again, time. All right. Joe, over to you when you begin speaking.
When you think about movie trilogies or movie franchises, what is more important than cohesion, than building off the things that come before? You may not always like the way they build off of them, as in The Last Jedi. It was a divisive film. But the problem is when the next movie just completely ignores half of what was set up in the movie before it, has a disjointed story that doesn't make sense, and just tries to shoehorn things in like The Rise of Skywalker does. They're literally trying to scrub things to pretend they never happened. And it just resulted in one of the most atrocious pieces of sci-fi space opera that we have ever seen. Now, I don't think there's necessarily any awful Star Wars movies, because Star Wars is Star Wars. But there are certainly some that are worse than others.
And time. All right. And with that, I want to say an official congratulations to Disney. You guys made movies so bad the prequels aren't in this conversation. Great job, guys. 20 years worth of hate down the toilet in 2 shots. Good job.
To be fair, prequels are two prequel movies are 2 of my bottom 3 Star Wars movies. So.
How dare you?
Hey, listen, what matters is what we're talking about on the show. It doesn't matter that the other guy picked a prequel film. He's not here right now, so we can shit on Disney for this, okay? Right. We're going to go ahead and jump into the 2-minute segment. Don, back over to you, sir. Yep. Time starts when you begin speaking.
Okay, so the argument that these movies, or that your movie is just trying to do or get rid of what happened in the last movie, is exactly the same criticism that my movie has. So I don't believe that. I think that argument sort of evens each of these movies out in that sense. Again, this movie introduces one of the worst character arcs for one of the most beloved characters in Star Wars. It introduces Force Skype. I don't know what that is. It introduces the Force projection in a way where we get one of the worst fight scenes with Luke Skywalker ever. I mean, it's horrible. It's a horrible ending to a movie. And it literally goes nowhere because, like you said, your movie just tries to discredit what my movie does, like my movie does to Episode 7. So there's really no point to the movie at all, and we should never even get to your movie for that reason alone. But again, you can't overlook the horrible choice of taking Luke Skywalker and making him a hermit on this weird island where he, one, disrespects a lightsaber, and two, has given up on the Force completely because of a decision that didn't get made. And that he almost tried to commit because of a vision of something that may or may not have happened. Again, not the Luke Skywalker that I remember from the original trilogy, not where I think he would be at that point in his life, and definitely not worth making the movie if that's the story you're going to tell. Not to mention, it's just so long and drawn out.
And time. All right, Joe, back over to you.
I understand that you don't like the decisions that they made in The Last Jedi to move forward. But The Last Jedi is an artistic, well-written, well-directed masterpiece of a film. It is not maybe what you would consider a great Star Wars movie, but to other people, it is. The Last Jedi divided the fandom. That is absolutely true. But The Rise of Skywalker nearly destroyed it. There was almost no coming back. It wasn't until Favreau and Filoni brought Mandalorian into our lives that we started to regain confidence in Star Wars. They talked about not making any more Star Wars movies because of how poor that movie was. It literally almost took the whole thing down. Your movie built characters in a different way, but it didn't completely change facts like who Rey's parents were, or just miraculously bring people back from the dead. Somehow, it didn't just fabricate entire storylines just to justify using characters and vice versa. This movie felt like a capitulation to Reddit more than it did a cohesive film. It's not about the story, how the characters progressed, how I wanted them to go. It's about the way that they went. And once they go a certain way, regardless of if you feel like that's how it should have went, to then turn it all around and just ignore it is blatant disrespect for not only the creatives before you, but for the franchise as a whole. It literally shot itself in the foot and nearly put the whole thing out to pasture. And I'll yield the rest of my time.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and jump into the 4-minute open discussion. Once the timer turns over to 0, the first competitor speaks. The timer will start back up for you guys.
According to Rotten Tomatoes, the order of Star Wars films starts with Empire at 94, The Force Awakens at 93, New Hope at 93, and The Last Jedi at 91. Top 5. You have to keep reading for a long, long time before you reach The Rise of Skywalker.
Rotten Tomatoes, that's what you're going with? I'm going with what impacts the story of Star Wars the most. What is the worst Star Wars movie? The worst Star Wars movie is the movie that doesn't stay true to the characters, which is The Last Jedi. Does not stay true to Luke. It definitely doesn't stay true to Leia. It just pushes her aside. I mean, it's very. We do get the scene with her kind of surviving the space, but there's no cohesive story because the entire movie is trying to get rid of Episode 7. We get one of the worst.
I don't think he got rid of Episode 7 at all. It just built off it a different way than you thought it would.
No, it did not.
Yes, it did. It built off
it did not. Episode 7, it has been confirmed that in episode 7, there at that point she was going to be a Kenobi. Then episode 8, she was a nobody. That was the whole point of episode 8, is that she was a nobody.
She wasn't supposed to be a Kenobi. That was just what
they were going at that
JJ would
point.
have done if he wanted to make all the movies.
That's what he
That's
told
not.
her.
That's not this. But he didn't make the movie. If he wanted her to be a Kenobi,
He
then
made
he should have
7.
made the
Yes, he
next
did make
movie.
7. He made
He didn't
7.
make 8, is what I'm saying. If he wanted to finish the story, if he wanted it to go
That's
that way,
because they didn't have a plan. That's
it doesn't
not
matter.
his fault.
Once the next writer's in place and the next writer goes somewhere, it's like if you're sitting around and you're doing one-word stories or one-sentence stories. You can't just completely change the story. You could change the direction that it's heading, but once it's already headed a direction, you can't then just go all the way back and re-divert. You can't just create a branch timeline.
You cannot sit here and tell me that with where they go with Luke Skywalker and The Last Jedi, that is not the worst turn of a character ever. After how we see him fight for his father to come back to the light side.
I think the worst turn of a character is Ben kissing Rey and bringing her back to life in some magical fucking trade-off of his life for hers. Like, that's suddenly something that the good guys do, bringing people back to life. I thought that was all dark side magic and this and that, but that's how he became free. And now let's just make new shit up that never happened before. Let's bring back goopy clones from outer space. And let's start breeding new
movie
fucking
at least finishes a
Palpatines.
trilogy. It at least finishes a trilogy and finishes.
Well, the middle
story.
movie wouldn't.
Yes, there's a lot of flaws with the movie. We know that. We know there's flaws with both of these movies. Your movie at least finishes a trilogy and it finishes a story. The story makes no sense. The story has no ending, really.
John, every third movie in a trilogy
that's not the
finishes
worst
the trilogy.
Star Wars movie just because it's completely fumbled by JJ because of what Rian Johnson gave him from episode 8. Episode 8, without that movie, there's a possibility episode 9 could have been good, but it's not because there's no setup.
Episode 9 could have been good if he just went off of what Rian Johnson built in episode 7.
They just completely blow one of the biggest characters in Star Wars. He would not just give up on a family member.
Luke should be going there. He would
never give up on a family member just because he saw a vision of something that might happen. That is not the Luke that they set up in episode 4, 5, and 6.
But that is who Luke is. Luke was never really a hero. He wanted to save his friends. He wanted to defeat his father.
Luke was not a hero.
He was reluctant.
I want that noted for the judges. He was not a hero.
All right, we're going to go into the final minute of the round. Don, you are back up first, sir, so the timer will start for you when you begin speaking.
We're talking about the worst story in Star Wars. We're talking about the worst movie in Star Wars. This is completely fumbles a legacy character, completely loses a storyline that was actually going somewhere somewhat decent after episode 7. I really like what JJ set up in episode 7, and I feel like this movie, without this movie being what it was, and the horrible decisions that it made with the characters that JJ set up, it completely ruins the entire trilogy for that reason. There's no way to make an episode 9 after you get 7 and then 8 following it. There's no way to make an episode 9 off of this movie based on what we get in episode 7. And again, I can't stress enough, Luke Skywalker gives up on a family member because of a vision. It doesn't make sense. It's not cohesive with Star Wars and the lore. It's just not.
And time. All right, and then the final minute of the round goes to you, Joe, when you begin speaking.
How do clones retain memory? How do body parts come back to become people? Is this Doctor Who or Star Wars? I understand that you don't like the choices that they made in episode 8. I get it. But once they made them, they couldn't unmake them. You can't just make a movie after that completely ignores that film. Episode 8 altered what episode 7 gave you. Episode 9 just shit all over everything that episode 8 built. Whether you liked it or not, it was there already. It's like trying to build a house on top of a house that already exists. It's not going to be a very safe structure. Not an architect, but even I know roofs are crooked, so you can't lay it flat on it, otherwise the house will fall off. Seems pretty obvious to me.
And that is time. All right, guys. Good job there. Once again, I'm going to go ahead and put you guys in the back as I will bring our judges forward. All right, and I hope all of you Star Wars fans got something out of that, because I feel like we basically hit the catharsis of everyone's problem with that trilogy in hand. Good job, guys. Just really letting Disney have it. I just have to say, I'm sorry. Look, I'm a guy that runs an internet show for zero fucking pay, and I put better planning into this shit than you put into your billion-dollar trilogy. Come on, guys. What the fuck happened there? I think we can all just agree with that at the very least, no matter which one you dislike more. Just how do you draw? Even Marvel, who's in the middle of a middling run at best, still has a fucking plan. Like, how the fuck do you miss the first step of filmmaking? Just good Christ. All right, based off the arguments and not our own personal afflicting feelings, Chris, I go to you. Who gets your vote?
I never thought I would agree with the person, even though I loved the movie he picked. I had to go with Don. He did the Luke Skywalker argument, and much I disagree with him personally. He did make a good argument how it ruined Star Wars in general more than Rise of Skywalker did. I can't say any more. I just about to throw up if I had to.
All right, Richie, down to you. Who gets your vote?
I actually have to go with Joe here. I think, as much as like people might have issues with Last Jedi. I personally liked it, but it completely Rise of Skywalker completely ignores it, and I feel like you've got to you can't ignore the movie before, and if you want to make a cohesive trilogy, and as a result, the trilogy is kind of a jumbled mess. So I think he did a good job explaining that. So I'm going to go with Joe.
All right, which means Alec, I go down to you. Who gets your vote, and what was the main selling point?
Yeah, this was hard for me because I really in my mind have thought of this, and I just went with Don though, man. Like I think Joe didn't talk up The Last Jedi enough, and Don was able to really attack really attack The Last Jedi, and also maybe even talk up a little bit of the Rise of Skywalker.
All right, absolutely. Judges, thank you guys so much. We're going to go ahead and sit you guys in the back because we're not done yet. I made a joke earlier about we're giving these guys the full gambit. He's wearing a Rise of Skywalker shirt. Look at it. That is the only T-shirt they sold from that film, by the way. I think you're the only guy who owns that piece of merch.
I know, it's hilarious. I hate these movies.
I'm shocked they even made. Okay. All right. So with that said, I made a joke earlier that we're giving you guys the full scope of the show tonight. We really are giving you guys the full scope because it is tied at 2-2, which means we are going to the tiebreaker, which is the blind round. All right, here we go. So the way that the blind round works is you guys are going to be getting a question. It is one that has minimal connection to anything else in this match. You have no idea what I'm about to ask you. But that is not even the trickiest that it gets. The way that this is going to go is I'm going to give you a generalization of a question. My classic example has always been name me a Will Smith movie. Off of the generalization, you will give me a film that meets the qualification. Then I will give you the actual question. Whether or not you feel your answer lines up 100%, you will have to do your best to debate for it. You'll get a couple of minutes off screen to put an argument together, and then we will come back and debate. Aside from that, the actual rules of the debate are kept the same. I feel like I'm fucking with you enough in the question, so it'll be steady from here on out in terms of how it'll run. But with that said, are you guys ready for it?
Yes, sir.
In the words of the immortal Kool-Aid Man, oh yeah.
All right, let's go ahead and jump into it. And so funny enough, for a behind-the-scenes thing, the way that the blind round questions work is I do write a question for every single match. But what happens is when I put a question into our StreamYard list of questions, until it gets used, I don't remove it unless it just so happens to be a question that a competitor, I have note that they've heard this question before, and then I will change it. And this does have a little bit of tie into that last question, because this guy was in a Star Wars film. He was in the better of those three, but he was in a Star Wars film. Not that you can answer Star Wars for the question. The generalization is, name me a Simon Pegg film released in the 2000s. And that is 2000 to 2009. And if you guys do need to run a Google search, you are allowed to do so. You don't have to just completely go off the top.
Shaun of the Dead? Was that
Shaun of the Dead?
Period, right?
Okay. Yep, Shaun of the Dead 2004. Perfectly in that period.
Okay. Oops. Really? Thought you could just pull it up. Oh, there we go. All right, I'm trying to find the
All good.
actor. Yeah, okay, this is right. So 2000s? Okay.
Yeah. From 2000 to 2009. Because if you split an actor's career into decades, you can stretch out the question list.
Oh, yeah. That's why it's hard. I'm just trying to think of what was actually in that time period.
No, you're good.
You said Shaun of the Dead, right?
Yep. Joe answered Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah, I'll go with the first Star Trek.
Okay, Star Trek. That was 09. Perfect. All right, so we have Shaun of the Dead versus Star Trek. And in this instance, in my own personal opinion, I would say you get to have a positive experience in the Blind Round Boys. The question is, what is the best film featuring Simon Pegg released in the 2000s? And I should say featuring is just a term for the question. You don't have to argue the semantics of what featuring means. It's just, I'd say he probably had more supporting roles than leading in the 2000s. So some people are semantical about wording. I just want to put that out there. All right. Anyways, you guys are going to have a couple minutes behind the scenes to put an argument together for this. But for you watching at home, it's going to be a couple seconds. So we'll be back in just a moment with the Blind Round. All right, guys, and we are back heading into the Blind Round. If you need a reminder from 10 seconds ago, the prompt that was given was to name a Simon Pegg film released in the 2000s. The question is, what is the best film featuring Simon Pegg released in the 2000s? And I think there's an argument that maybe outside of the people who love Hot Fuzz, I think you might have picked the two best from that 2000s. So I'm interested to see how this goes. With that said, Joe, because you did answer first, you are going to be going first on the question once again. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the timer up for you. I'm going to say you guys have had a great debut match, entertaining in addition to well debated. So congratulations on that. Best of luck to you both. Joe, time starts when you begin speaking.
When you think Simon Pegg, now in 2023, you may think of his role as Huey's dad in The Boys. A terrific, dare I say, super, yet minor part. However, when you heard Simon Pegg for most of my adult life, you thought of two things: Nick Frost and Shaun of the Dead. The movies he's most known for are a trilogy of films known as the Cornetto Trilogy, and the most famous and popular of those is Shaun of the Dead. It's a spoof movie on every zombie movie. It's a spoof movie that may have surpassed the cultural relevance of the movie that it spoofed in a way that maybe Scary Movie and Scream have. Other than that, I couldn't think of another. It is a first, and it's certainly not a last. Simon Pegg's best movie.
And time. All right, Don, over to you.
So yes, if we're talking about what is this best Simon Pegg movie, Shaun of the Dead is the obvious answer. The question is, though, what is the best film featuring Simon Pegg? And that's obviously 2009 Star Trek. We get one of the best openings to a trilogy ever. J.J. Abrams completely revitalized that franchise for a whole group of fans that were not really, big Star Trek fans that really love that movie. We get introduced to Chris Pine as Kirk, which is just one of the best castings ever. He fits that perfectly. Greenwood as Pike is really great. We get Nimoy back. Can't ever argue with that. So yeah, I mean, again, what I was thinking when I picked this was, what's the best film featuring Simon Pegg? And I think that's the right answer.
And time. All right, back up to you, Joe. 2 minutes.
Simon Pegg's greatest asset in his acting is his relationship with Nick Frost. The chemistry between the two of them is what catapulted and upheld their careers. There is noticeably something that Shaun of the Dead has that Star Trek does not, and that something's name is Nick Frost. Now, Star Trek was a pretty good movie. Shaun of the Dead is an all-time cult classic comedy with a 92% score for critics on Rotten Tomatoes and an audience score that parallels. It is universally loved, has very few people, nary a one, who might disagree and dislike it. However, Star Trek, while I think it was a good movie, there were plenty of people who did not, who thought that they didn't do justice to the original material, to the original Star Trek. Not everybody liked it universally in the way that, to me, Shaun of the Dead was received. I have yet to meet a single person who outright says they dislike Shaun of the Dead. I do know people who disliked Star Trek. Shaun of the Dead is a movie about relationships, about family, about balancing your friends, your love life, your family, and all the pressures that the world throws on your shoulders. It's about fighting between who we are and who we are becoming. It's about change and growth inside a person, about doing the things that we must versus the things we want to. And it does it all over the backdrop of a zombie apocalypse. Oh, and did I mention it's one of the best comedies of all time? The movie is a perfect example of what made Simon Pegg and Nick Frost so popular. The zombies look way better than they should have, and Edgar Wright's direction style is on full display.
And time. All right, Don, back over to you. 2 minutes.
Okay, again, we're talking about what is the best movie. As yes, Shaun of the Dead, Rotten Tomatoes 92% fresh, 93% audience meter. Star Trek is 94 and 91. So that's really not argument against my movie. It was well received. It's well built as revitalizing the Star Trek universe and opening it up to a lot more people. A lot and love Star Trek because of this movie. So again, we're talking about the best movie. I mean, we get, as I said before, we get Chris Pine. We get blanking on the name now, as Zulu from Harold and Kumar. He's great in this. We get Carl Urban as Bones. There's so many great movie. And we get the great storyline in this movie. I haven't even really touched on yet, as far as what happened to Kirk's dad, and we get the time travel element of that, and what happened with Spock. Again, this movie is the better movie that Simon Pegg, featuring Simon Pegg. If we're going with the best Simon Pegg movie, Shaun of the Dead wins hands down. But we're going with the best movie featuring Simon Pegg, which is Star Trek. I yield my time.
All right. So we'll go ahead and jump into the 4-minute open discussion. The timer will start back up once again for you guys when the first competitor speaks.
A big budget blockbuster, famous director, studio backing, stars galore. Still not as well loved as a little indie darling by a small director named Edgar Wright and some young upstarts named Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. Wow. What a journey. What a story. What a movie. What effort it takes to make so much out of so little. And how much they did. Once again, other than Scary Movie, what other spoof movie is more quoted and more loved than the originals that it's spoofed off of? Okay, I'll just keep going then. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the car, go to Mum's, kill Phil, grab Liz, go to the Winchester, have a nice cold pint, and just wait for all of this to blow over. So you know why you're laughing? Because you know that line. Because it's one of the greatest movies of all time, and it's super quotable, rewatchable, endearing, and everybody likes it. It just makes you happy. And isn't that what movies should do? Just make you happy. This is the open debate, though.
Oh, this is the 4 minutes? No, it's not. It's your 2 minutes.
I went first.
It is the open
sorry.
debate.
No, you're right. Oh my god. Okay, I'm sorry. I completely lost on. I was lost on that part. Okay. No, look.
You're good. Here, I'll give you the help. For those at home, it is now after midnight. This got started a little late.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good. I'll give you a few minutes. I'll give you a minute or so.
No, go ahead. I was going to say is, again, we're talking about the best movie featuring Simon Pegg, not the best Simon Pegg movie. And yes, Shaun of the Dead wins that debate, and that's not even a question. But you said that he doesn't have his best movies are with Nick Frost. That's not true. He's got great movies without Nick Frost. I don't. That's not even fair. He's had a way better career without Nick Frost than with him. He just had that trilogy. That's all they've really had together.
Just after that trilogy?
They've been in other things together, but those are the best three movies that they've made.
Those are the best three movies that Nick Frost or Simon Pegg
correct, but Simon Pegg has gone on past that. But he's gone on past that and made other movies that were.
But really I just said it's the greatest movies that either one of them have been in, and you said yes, just like that on record. That you just agreed with that statement. So, yeah. Anyway. I mean, look at it. For a low budget movie, the zombies look amazing. It all holds up. The writing is stellar. The writing in Shaun of the Dead way outshines the writing in Star Trek. Star Trek has fancy visuals and laser guns and phasers.
It completely opened up that franchise to a whole new fan base. And it also, for the most part, appeased the original fan base. I mean, there were people that didn't like it from the originals, but overall, nobody really. It wasn't like when the sequels came out from Star Wars. It's
Shaun of the Dead.
It wasn't the same reception. Now, the later movies may have got that reception, but that movie was pretty well received by everybody, from what I remember.
Shaun of the Dead created a new zombie comedy genre almost, that warm bodies. You had other movies spinning off trying to be as good and failing. You had shows, Z Nation on Sci-Fi, trying to take the same sort of path. But nothing has reached the level that Shaun of the Dead has, whereas
you don't think
Star Wars movies have gone way past Star Trek.
You can't disagree with the fact that Simon Pegg as Scotty is one of the best castings ever.
It's not his best movie.
So,
All right, we have 1 minute left, guys. Joe, you're up first. Time starts when you begin speaking.
Simon Pegg's best movie is Shaun of the Dead. Shaun of the Dead is just the best movie, not only that Simon Pegg is in, but that Simon Pegg is worked on. It's the greatest thing he's done. It's got a meta, outside the box way of looking at things. It's showing you all the trials and tribulations that we can all relate to, that we've all lived through, that we've all had to go to, just ramped up to 11 with a zombie apocalypse just living around us. The threat of being eaten up by life every day, not just chewed up and spit out like the rest of us are, but literally eaten. This is about trying to hang out with your friends, just have a beer, but all the pressure of life and all of life's bullshit getting in the way. All you want is to sit and be happy. And Shaun of the Dead is that ice cold beer waiting at the Winchester at the end of the world while the rest of the world has gone to shit. Because sometimes you just have to sit.
Time. All right. And Don, back over to you. Final minute of the round when you begin speaking, sir.
If I want to sit down and watch a Simon Pegg movie, I'm going to pick Shaun of the Dead. If I want to sit down and watch the best movie that he is in this time, it is Star Trek. It has the better performances. It is definitely the better overall story. Yes, it is the better written story overall. Absolutely. Simon Pegg is a genius with writing comedy, but Star Trek is a much harder franchise to get right, especially in the writing. And J.J. Abrams did nail that. That would have been one of the first things that would have attacked if he didn't get the dialogue right and the way that they talk and stuff like that. And even with him adding the action and all of that to the movie, it was still the better movie that Simon Pegg was in. So, again, for those reasons, I think the correct answer to the question is what is the better movie featuring Simon Pegg, which is by far Star Trek. I yield.
All right. And that will bring to a close an excellent debut match for both of you guys, but unfortunately only one can take the victory. So for that, we're going to sit you guys in the back and bring our judges forward for the final decision here. Just a couple quick fact checks. The actor who plays Hikaru Sulu is John Cho of the Harold and Kumar and American Pie films, for those of you who have only seen comedies in the early 2000s. And then, yeah, these films were basically near critically in terms of audience review and critic review identical. Star Trek holds a 94% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes with an 8.1 out of 10 average score. Shaun of the Dead holds a 92% approval rating with a 7.8 out of 10 average score. Audiences, Star Trek has a 91% approval rating. Shaun of the Dead is a 93% approval rating, but both hold a 4.3 out of 5 score. So these movies are both easily some of the most lauded films of his career. So it is down to the argument. Richie, who is able to sell you more?
Yeah. I believe Simon Pegg also helped write Star Trek, if I'm not mistaken.
He wrote the third one, Star Trek.
I wrote the third one. Cool. Anyway,
Yes.
This is tough. This is really tough, man. This is a really good debut match. I was going back and forth. Ultimately, I think Joe's closer got it for me. I think, like he really sold the emotion. He sold why Shaun of the Dead is quite an important movie. Why it's really good, and why it's not just a zombie movie. What it symbolized, what that it's about friendship. It's that kind of like it's about kind of the trying to like relax from the monotony, the dragging down of life, and then, it made me want to watch the film. So I'm going to go with Joe.
Okay, which means Alec will go to you. Who gets your vote?
I also went Joe. I think Joe was able to really, really hammer home why Shaun of the Dead is a cult classic and one of the greatest horror comedies of all time.
All right. Well, judges, thank you guys so much. I'm going to go ahead and sit you guys in the back because Your winner by a final score of 3-2 is Joseph Boros, pulling out a genuinely hard-fought victory. I'm going to say the same to Don. I think you guys, this season so far, you guys are the second set of rookies that we've had debut, and I said the same to the earlier one. That first match between Jeremy and Ross was one of the most equal matches I've ever seen, and I would say tonight as well for two rookies, you guys were incredibly evenly matched. And the fact that you guys know each other so well added another layer to the way you guys were coming at each other. How do you feel pulling out the victory?
I mean, it feels good. It was stressful there for a minute, but throwing some haymakers back and forth. You gotta protect your chin. Thought he had me in the first half there, but then whoo, it went my way. Thankfully, that last question really rolled in my favor because, Simon Pegg, one of my favorite actors, his comedies. Shaun of the Dead is one of my favorite movies of all time. It's a classic. It's just a movie that I've grown up with and that I adore.
Yeah, man. The blind round is one of those things. Sometimes it just perfectly rolls your way, and then other times you wind up with, I believe, outside of a title match, I think the only blind round that our current champion, Amaru Moses, ever lost was when he was given a Conjuring question for a blind round, and I don't think he'd actually seen any of those films. So sometimes it works out in your favor, sometimes it doesn't. Tonight, certainly, I guess it did work for you. So in terms of, obviously, we don't force anybody to do anything here, but we would love to have you back if you do want to come back. And your next matchup, you're going to get to continue the sort of friendly run because you are going to be taking on Josh in your next match because we already had one set up for Don. So you are going to be taking on Josh in your next match. He'll be making his debut against you in the next round of matchups. Obviously, he was supposed to be a part of this one. It didn't work out because he had a project he's working on filming and scheduling was tight. But how are you feeling about you're going from one to another, taking on somebody you know?
It's good. It does make it a little trickier. People who you have these conversations with on a regular basis, but it also gives you a few more arrows in your quiver. You kind of know how to rattle people. You gotta try to play the hand you dealt. Josh is a hell of an arguer, so we will see how that goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it was great to have you here. I'm glad to finally get you in here, sir. Congrats on the win, and we will see you next time in that match. Take care of yourself. Absolutely. We'll put you in the back and bring in Don. And again, as I always say to people, no one likes to lose, but I feel like this is not a loss that you should take lightly because, again, very evenly matched, very back and forth down to the end. In fact, I think that blind round question might have been the only one just because Chris did flip his board at the end. I think that was the only one where the judges unanimously agreed. I think every other question was pretty much split the entire way through, which is very impressive to do on your guys' debut.
Yeah, no, it was a great time, man. I really had fun. It was interesting going against somebody I know pretty well. But no, Joe fought a good round. And yeah, that last round, I was going to pick Hot Fuzz. And I'm like, I can't argue Hot Fuzz against Shaun of the Dead. There's no way you can argue that. So I was trying to think what would be the better movie. So that's why I went with Star Trek. And it's just been so long since I've seen that movie. I just couldn't pull really many details from the movie that I could remember off the top of my head. So it was tough.
That's absolutely fair, man. Fun. And so as we said, so this doesn't normally happen, but when you came in, obviously you were very enthusiastic, and we were sort of working on the scheduling for this, what was supposed to be the three-way match, and trying to figure all that out. And you were just like, hey, if you have another matchup for me, just go ahead and set me up and we'll kind of get the ball rolling. So in terms of the upload schedule, you'll actually be back in just a couple of weeks. You will be taking on Sean Sandberg, who debuted very similarly to you. He debuted at the end of last season as a rookie. His debut match was also pretty evenly matched. He did go to the blind round. He did take the victory in that match, but I think the fact that he's technically 1-0, you're technically 0-1, doesn't really make a difference because you're both one match deep and you both definitely showed some chops in that match. Again, his was very 50-50 the entire way through, and he just got lucky in the end with that blind round. So obviously, as far as I'm aware, you know very little about your opponent, but without giving away anything about the questions or the answers, how are you feeling so far going into that matchup? Because you guys are already in the prep process leading into this.
Sure. Yeah, I just started the prep process pretty much for this one. I'm excited, man. I was really excited for this match, getting to play Joe, but yeah, I'm definitely excited to get to play somebody different and kind of see how how they come at the questions and how I'm going to have to counter it in the moment and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm really excited for that match coming up.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Questions are very interesting. Questions are very interesting. So
different question set for sure. Different question set. So we look forward to having you back then, sir. Till then, take care of yourself. We will see you as we go ahead and close out. Again, what was an excellent debut match from both of these guys. I think they both showed that with some sort of, fine tuning of their game, they could definitely go far in this league with picking up some wins. But that is going to be it tonight. Once again, thank you to Joe and Don for being here, having excellent matches. Thank you to my judges, Chris. I'm a horrible person. I'm blanking because their faces aren't in front of me. They've dropped out of the call. Thank you to Chris, Alec, and Richie for being here with us tonight. It's all right. They watched the match live. They're probably not going to watch the recording. They won't see that I did that. Thank you to all of you for watching. Please be sure to rate the video, drop a comment, interact, and subscribe with the channel, and stick around for more Movie Battleground. And I did want to say before we go one last time, in memory of Ben Rayner, it was unfortunate that we were never able to have you in here, sir, because from the moment that I initiated the contact, you just seemed so excited to get involved and be a part of something probably different from anything that you had done. But I am happy to have the people who were around you and helped light up your days be here, and I hope you are resting well, sir. In honor of Ben, this has been an excellent match. You guys played brilliantly. On behalf of everyone, my name is Aaron Knoll, and we will see you next time. Take care.